What's going on, folks? Eddie Carrington, Mayor of Flux City. With regard to today's weekly video, I'm going to try something a little different. We're going to talk about the 5 things every Detroit developer is watching right now, or should be watching in today's market. But when it comes to this style of content, I am exploring and trying different things. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, and we potentially may bring more of this format to you more consistently on the weekly basis. But we also do this type of format when it comes to the Patreon content that I create as well. But a lot of people think developers spend all day walking construction sites and, looking at cool buildings. And that's certainly part of the job. Don't get me wrong. But the reality is that development is really about managing risk, right? Every week there are dozens of things that are happening in the economy, city government, construction, financial markets. These types of things can completely change whether a project moves forward, pencils out, or basically gets shelved, right? So today I want to talk to you about 5 things every serious Detroit developer is paying attention to right now, or should be, right? So if you're a developer, investor, contractor, architect, lender, or just somebody curious about how cities actually get built, these are the types of conversations happening behind closed doors. Let's get into it. Now, the first topic I want to talk about is probably one of the most important when it comes to helping a project pencil, right? And that is interest rates. Interest rates are something that developers are consistently having discussions about when it comes to if we can make a project pencil at the end of the day. So this is obviously very, very important, but interest rates aren't necessarily the whole story. They definitely matter because when interest rates rise, borrowing money becomes more expensive. Now, when it comes to developers, however, we don't necessarily care just about where the rates are today. We care about certainty. If rates dramatically move during a project that takes 3 or 4 years to complete, that can completely change the economics of this project. So you got to keep that in mind, right? A project that worked 2 years ago, unfortunately, might not work today based off of when that loan is actually able to get closed, right? But interestingly enough, many developers have already adjusted, right? The bigger question now isn't necessarily what are the rates, it's what does the lending market look like? Because you can have reasonable interest rates and still struggle to get financing. Number 2, construction costs, right? We thought after COVID things would kind of, go back to quote unquote normal, but year over year, things are consistently increasing in price, right? I have yet to see within the last 5 years a project executed here in the city of Detroit that comes within budget, right? In most cases, these are projects that are having to go back to the banks to ask for more money to in turn complete said project. And that is because in a lot of scenarios, construction costs are continuously rising. A few years ago, every month felt like another price increase, right? Lumber, steel, concrete, electrical equipment, mechanical systems, everything seems to be moving up, right? Costs have stabilized in a way compared to the wild pandemic swings, but stabilized does not mean inexpensive. Construction is still incredibly expensive, and labor has become one of the biggest challenges. It's not just finding contractors, it's finding good contractors. Now, shout out to Motor City Contractor Fund for prepping the next generation of contractors, right? Because these individuals and organizations coming out of Motor City Contractor Fund, they're able to execute. So it's not a scenario where we're not having access anymore, but the challenge is there is still a bottleneck because the number of licensed contractors that are willing to do work here in the city of Detroit, in comparison to the amount of projects that are looking for good contractors, that's the challenge, right? And so now these contractors will need to, on top of the labor on their end and insurance and materials, they're going to have to boost up their price in order to keep up with demand. So there are contractors that we as developers have access to, but more importantly, we need contractors who communicate, who can stay on schedule, who deliver quality work, right? That's becoming just as valuable as finding competitive pricing. The third topic I want to discuss with you is insurance, right? Insurance has become a huge deal, right? This is one of the topics that almost nobody outside the industry understands or talks about because they don't understand the challenges that developers and investors are having when it comes to property insurance, when it comes to builder's risk, general liability, umbrella policies, right? All of these costs have climbed. And so when it comes to apartment buildings, mixed use buildings, commercial spaces, insurance is becoming a bigger line item every single year. As a developer, you put an estimate of what your insurance is going to cost for the construction phase and for the completion phase, right? When you're actually in business, right? And you're in operation. Unfortunately, a lot of people are underestimating that cost. And by the time you have an active construction site, your insurance may be triple what you projected in your pro forma a few years ago, because higher insurance costs impacts things like operating costs, which impacts rents, which impacts financing, which impacts whether projects pencil out, right? It's one of those hidden dominoes that affects the entire development ecosystem. Now, number 4, commercial leasing. It's evolving over time, right? One thing I'm watching closely is how local businesses are making decisions. Restaurants, coffee shops, retail, fitness studios, professional offices. Many entrepreneurs still want physical space, but they're being more strategic. They're asking, how much space do I really need? Can I share a little bit of this space? Can I phase out my growth a bit? Can I negotiate tenant improvements? Right? Developers have to adapt to that. And so the days of assuming every tenant wants 5,000 square feet are largely gone. And flexibility has become one of the biggest competitive advantages. Now, number 5, funding for affordable housing, right? This might be the single biggest conversation happening in Detroit development as we speak. Affordable housing. People often ask, if affordable housing is so needed, why isn't more of it being built? Well, because it usually doesn't work financially without layered funding, right? And we're talking about multiple layers: tax credits, grants, public incentives, foundation dollars, gap financing, loans, developer equity. Sometimes a project can have 6, 7, 8 different funding sources. And if one of those falls through, the whole project can be delayed, right? That's why affordable housing takes so long here in the city of Detroit. Not because developers are sitting around doing nothing. It's because assembling the capital stack is incredibly difficult. Now, I know I said 5, but I also want to add a bonus to the overall list. One of the things that I'm personally watching is relationships, right? More than ever, relationships with neighborhoods, lenders, contractors, city officials, investors. Development has always been a relationship business, but today, the people you know and the trust you've built can make the difference between a project moving forward or never leaving the drawing board. But overall, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that development is simply about buying a building and fixing it up. It's so much bigger than that, right? You're consistently balancing construction, finance, economics, politics, community engagement, architecture, operations, property management, and market demand, right? Every decision affects 10 other decisions. That's why development is so fascinating. You're not just building buildings, you're building businesses, right? You're building neighborhoods, and hopefully you're building places that people are proud to call home. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you're in real estate, construction, architecture, property management, or you're just somebody who just enjoys following what's happening in Detroit, what do you think is the biggest challenge or biggest opportunity facing development today? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video.